The day my father died, I must have called my wife, Sarah, at least a dozen times, but every call went straight to voicemail. All I received in return was a single, brief text message claiming she was caught up working late at the office. Later, however, her personal assistant, Leo, made a post on his social media feed that seemed almost intentionally placed for me to find. It was a photograph of him and Sarah holding hands down by the riverside, with the bright explosions of fireworks reflecting in the water beside them. That image was the definitive end for me. I knew in that instant our marriage was over. When I finally confronted her, she displayed a side of herself I had never witnessed before, her eyes filling with tears as she pleaded with me, "Mark, please come back, okay?" But by then, it was too late. All I could hear in my head was the emotional equivalent of a disconnected line. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently unavailable." I was sitting on a hard plastic bench just outside the operating room, marking what must have been my 99th attempt to call Sarah that night. And still, she wasn't picking up. My father, who had been bedridden for several years, had taken a sudden turn for the worse, and he was rushed into emergency surgery. I had driven to the hospital as fast as I legally could, only to be handed a critical condition notice almost immediately upon arrival. The moment the doctor solemnly asked me to prepare for the worst possible outcome, my hands were trembling so much I could barely dial her number. I just needed her to answer the phone, but she didn't. At the time, I just assumed she was genuinely overwhelmed with work. It was then, while endlessly scrolling through my phone to pass the agonizing minutes, that I saw her assistant's new post. The caption read, "Fireworks blossom with each heartbeat," and accompanying it was a photo of him holding hands with someone. The sensation that followed was like being plunged into a pit of icy water because I recognized those hands instantly. They were Sarah's. As if on cue, a text message from Sarah finally came through at that exact moment. It simply said, "Working late, stop calling." A sharp pain seized my chest, but before I had even a second to process the implication of what I'd seen, the heavy doors to the operating room swung open. I looked up at the doctor, desperate for any sign of hope, but he just looked at me with profound pity and slowly shook his head. "I'm sorry," he said. "We did our best." I don't retain many clear memories of handling the immediate aftermath, only the visceral feeling of crying uncontrollably at my father's bedside, watching helplessly as his pale, peaceful face was covered by a white cloth. When I eventually regained some sense of my surroundings, I found myself sitting back in the hospital hallway, the bright screen of my phone flashing with an incoming call from Sarah. I just stared at her name for what felt like the longest time, finally answering it just a moment before it would have gone to voicemail. Sarah's voice sounded impatient, probably annoyed by my long delay in responding. "Why did it take you so long to answer?" she asked. I opened my mouth, but my throat was completely dry. "Busy," I managed to say. "Didn't see it." A heavy silence stretched between us, where she clearly waited for a more detailed explanation, sensing that something was wrong. "What happened? Where are you?" she pressed. There was absolutely no way I was going to tell her about what happened tonight. It wouldn't be her business for much longer anyway. "Nothing much," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Warm up the milk yourself. I won't be home tonight." It was a small ritual of ours. I'd always warmed a glass of milk for her before bed, no matter how late she came home. Realizing this now, in light of everything, just made me feel foolish and pathetic. The distance in my voice must have been obvious, because it made her uneasy. "Where are you? I'll come and get you," she offered. I almost laughed at the irony, but I stifled it, as any sound felt like a betrayal to my dad. I just wanted to be alone. No need, I replied. I'll be back tomorrow. You've been working hard, so you should get some rest. Sarah paused, and for a moment I could almost hear her nervousness, as if she feared I knew something. She quickly made an excuse and ended the call. I put the phone down quietly, sitting alone in the sterile hallway with a storm of conflicting emotions warring inside me. Closing my eyes, I could still hear my dad's gentle voice echoing in my mind, but now, even the memory of him felt like it was slipping away. I didn't have the energy to explain anything to Sarah, nor the will to argue. Even the simple act of breathing felt burdensome. In the profound quiet of that night, all I could do was sit and bear the crushing pain of losing someone so dear to me. I suddenly remembered something that happened back when I was 18, something I had said to Sarah. At the time, her own father had just taken his life. Sarah's life story was undeniably tragic. Her mother had been a compulsive gambler who, after racking up a massive debt, was killed by her collectors. This left her dad to resort to illegal, underground fighting just to pay off the debt and keep them afloat. Sarah herself juggled 3 different jobs to help out, all while trying to be a full-time student, but the debt was simply crushing them. Finally, during her senior year of high school, her father couldn't bear the immense pressure and constant gossip anymore, and he ended his life. I had gone to her house that day to borrow some notes for class and found the front door slightly ajar. I found her in the bathroom, staring vacantly at her dad's body on the floor, looking as if she might collapse at any second. The sight of the blood made me feel queasy, but without thinking, I stepped forward, covered Sarah's eyes with my hand, and gently led her out of the room. She didn't resist, following me like a puppet, but I could feel her warm tears seeping against my palm. Later, the neighbors called the police, and I stayed by Sarah's side through the entire ordeal, including her dad's funeral. Back at her empty house, she finally broke down. "Why? Why does everyone leave me?" she cried, pounding her fists against the wall as tears streamed down her face. It hurt to see her like that, so I just hugged her softly. "Sarah," I said, "you've still got me. I won't leave you." She paused, then clung to me tightly, as if I was her only lifeline in the world. "Mark," she whispered. "Mark, you're all I have." She had been at her absolute lowest point, and I had been her only support. But now, all these years later, I had lost someone close to me too, and the one person who should have been by my side was off with someone else. I covered my face with my hands, but no more tears came. I felt as though I'd cried them all out over Dad's body. After sitting in the silence for a long time, I picked up my phone and made a call to my lawyer. "Hi," I said, my voice flat. "Can you draft a divorce agreement for me?" The next day, I went home for a brief period while I knew Sarah would be at work. I pulled out a suitcase from the closet and started packing my essential belongings. I didn't take much, not even the gifts Sarah had given me on holidays over the years. Once I finished, I sent a simple message to Sarah. "I'm going on a business trip for a few days." I didn't get a reply, but I didn't expect one. She was probably with Leo, enjoying a love-filled lunch somewhere. Without lingering, I left the house and went straight to the airport. For the following week, I busied myself with all the arrangements for Dad's funeral back in my hometown, making a point not to tell any of our mutual friends about it, mostly to avoid any chance of Sarah finding out. When I finally heard from her indirectly, it was already a week later. I had just gotten off the plane, returning from the funeral, when I got a call from my best buddy, Ben. He had been helping me handle some of the initial divorce preparations while I was away. Mark, are you absolutely sure about this? Ben's voice was full of genuine concern. When I first told him I wanted a divorce, he was so shocked he nearly dropped his phone. We had been together with Sarah for over a decade, from high school sweethearts to a married couple, and our friends always pointed to us as proof that real, lasting love existed. It was just too bad it didn't work out that way in the end. As I grabbed my luggage from the carousel, I replied, "Yeah, Ben, I've made up my mind. Don't worry." Ben heard the determination in my voice and decided to bring up something else. "Are you really moving abroad?" he asked. "Yeah," I confirmed. "The research I was focused on in college is much better suited for work overseas. If it wasn't for Sarah, I probably would have gone there right after graduation. My old college professor had even tried convincing me to go back then, but I always came up with excuses. Deep down, he knew I just didn't want to leave Sarah. Now, however, I was set on this new path. I had already spoken to my professor, and he was more than happy to welcome me to his research center. I just needed to clear things up here before I could head out. I chatted a bit more with Ben as I walked. But when I got to the arrivals area to grab a cab, I saw someone I absolutely did not expect to see. Sarah. What was she doing here? According to my front-line reporter, Ben, she was supposed to be at the hospital with Leo, who was apparently recovering from a serious car accident. No matter her reason for being here, I really didn't want to run into her. I pulled my hat lower on my head and put on my face mask, hoping I could just pass by her unnoticed. Maybe she had already moved on to someone new, because she didn't seem to recognize me at all as I walked past. She just kept waiting there, scanning the crowd. I glanced back over my shoulder, thinking I might have just been overthinking it. But just as I took a few more steps, someone grabbed my wrist. I instinctively pulled away, only to turn and see it was Sarah. "It's me," she said, her voice sounding a bit off. She stood directly in front of me, not looking at all pleased. "Why did you pretend not to see me?" she asked, with a clear hint of irritation. I blinked innocently and offered a slight smile. "Thought you were waiting for someone else." She paused, looking a bit annoyed by my response. "You're my husband. Who else would I be waiting for?" She always had a particular way of making simple statements sound like accusations. "Why are you upset?" I replied casually. "If you're here for me, let's go." She seemed taken aback by my detached attitude and frowned deeply. "If you have something to say, just say it." "What's with the attitude?" she huffed, and then seemed to sigh, as if realizing something. "Leo's accident. It was because of me, you know that. I couldn't just leave him," she explained. We had argued about this kind of stuff a lot before. I had asked her countless times why she was always so irritable with me, her husband, but so unfailingly kind and gentle to Leo. She never denied it, nor did she ever offer an explanation. She would just let me vent until I was too exhausted to speak. Then she'd simply say, "Stop it." Sort of like she was doing now. I sighed, echoing her own words back to her. "Stop it." Her expression darkened immediately, as if she was realizing the impact of those words for the first time. She tried to say something more, but she saw me heading towards the parking lot and reluctantly followed. As she drove, I remembered that I needed to meet with my lawyer about the divorce proceedings. "Drop me off at the next intersection," I said. "I've got something to take care of around here." Sarah didn't seem to hear me at first, and just kept driving. "It's Saturday," she finally said. "So what?" I asked. "Some law firms work on Saturdays." I asked, "What's so special about today?" Caught off guard by my simple question, she glanced at me during a red light, trying to revert to her old self. I'll be home today, she offered, as if this was some great gift. And? I replied. What did that have to do with me handling my business? Sarah looked at me like she was hearing wrong. It was true that I used to never go out on weekends, always wanting to spend every possible moment with her. Even if she worked late, I would wait up for her, just savoring every minute we had together. But once Leo showed up in her life, the time dwindled to almost nothing. Sometimes, when I called her at the office, Leo would be the one to answer, telling me she was working late and wouldn't make it home. But was it really just work, if she was comfortable enough to leave her personal phone with him? We fought about this often, but she would just act frustrated and tell me to calm down. It's just work, she'd insist. And Leo's a hard worker. He takes initiative. I'm just doing my job as his boss. I had pleaded with her to stay, begging her to choose me over her work. But she would just frown. Mark, you used to be more reasonable, she'd say, leaving me feeling ghostly and invisible. The more it happened, the less I cared about those rare moments we had together. Looking back on it now, I guess that was the real beginning of the end for us. As we neared the lawyer's office building, I tried again. I've got nothing to do at home. You can just let me out here. I'll catch a ride back later. This time, Sarah stopped the car. She sighed and rubbed her temples, looking tired. Mark, you're pushing it. I just blinked at her. Who was really causing all this fuss? My requests weren't unreasonable, were they? I explained it to you, she said, her voice rising. There's nothing between me and Leo. We're just boss and employee. I only care about him because of how he helps me at work. I gestured for her to stop talking and let out a small chuckle. I didn't say there was anything between you and Leo, I said. I'm not angry or upset. Just drop me off up ahead. Sarah gave me a deep, complex look, which now held a hint of genuine unease. Mark, she started, and she seemed like she had more to say, but my firm demeanor stopped her. She reluctantly pulled over to the curb. After I got out of the car, however, she didn't leave right away. I shot her a questioning look. I'll wait for you here, she said. We'll head home together once you're done. Her voice had an unusual touch of warmth to it. It had been so long since I'd seen her wear that kind of expression that I had almost forgotten how gentle she could be. Back in the day, no matter what was happening, I would have hopped right back into that car, even if the sky was falling. But now, I truly couldn't care less. There's no reason to sweat over someone who's pretty much about to be a stranger. I didn't stop her from insisting on waiting, but it seemed someone else wasn't happy about it. I had barely walked a few steps toward the building when she got a call. Her face changed in an instant, filling with a familiar urgency and worry. How long had it been since I'd seen her look like that? It didn't matter. It was clearly not me she was worried about. Sure enough, Sarah hurriedly drove off, not even bothering to offer an explanation for the situation. I just turned and walked into the law firm. Not that I had been counting on her to go home with me anyway. A moment later, while I was sitting with the lawyer discussing the divorce proceedings, I got a text from an unknown number. I can make her drop you in a heartbeat, it read. Don't you get it yet? You'd better leave her on your own. Then a second message came through with a photo. It showed a man's hand with an IV tube resting lightly on a woman's hand, and the woman, Sarah, seemed to sense it, gently clasping his fingertips. I thought about it for a moment and then calmly replied to the number. As you wish. It was afternoon by the time I left the law firm. I pulled out my phone to text Sarah, since she had inadvertently taken my luggage, and I noticed over a dozen unread messages from her. Sorry, Leo's condition suddenly got worse. I have to go. He was in that accident because of me. I can't just leave him be. Mark, did you see the messages? Mark, reply if you see this. Mark, what's your deal? I was just checking on a subordinate. What are you mad about this time? And finally, I won't be back today. Let's talk once you've calmed down. I was kind of speechless. Their loss that the drama club didn't recruit Sarah back in school. I barely missed some messages, and she had already crafted an entire narrative where I was the unreasonable one. I was too lazy to argue, so I just replied with a simple, "Okay." I grabbed a cab to go home. Sarah must have arranged to have my luggage sent back, because there it was, sitting alone in the entryway and looking completely out of place in this house. I fetched the signed divorce agreement from my bag, placed it squarely on the coffee table, and snapped a picture of it to send to Sarah. "Sign this when you get home," I texted. "I'm leaving. You can just mail it to the lawyer later." After sending the message, I gave the once cozy home one last long glance. What surprised me was how remarkably calm I felt. When I reached the door to change my shoes, I got another notification. I assumed it was Sarah again, but it turned out to be from Leo. He had sent a photo of a men's watch and nothing more. I knew exactly what he meant. It was a watch Sarah had given to him. Clearly, she cared a great deal for this assistant. I quickly finished changing my shoes and typed a reply. "Nice. Take good care of it." I didn't feel dishonest saying that. Sarah's taste has always been impeccable. When we got married, I loved the ring she picked out. I slipped the wedding ring off my finger and set it on the shoe rack by the door. I suppose I have Leo to thank for reminding me. I almost forgot to take off the ring. Once I left the house, I took out my SIM card, broke it in two, and tossed the pieces into the nearest trash can. I ended up crashing at Ben's place for the night. The next morning, I hailed a cab to the cemetery, as there were still some loose ends to tie up regarding my dad's passing. I finished wrapping things up and was about to call my best friend when I noticed a string of messages from him. "Mark, where are you? Sarah's been calling around looking for you." "Did you change your number without telling her?" "Don't worry, I didn't spill the beans. I know you've got your reasons." "Did you tell her about the divorce?" Man, seeing her panic was hilarious. "Finally, you've come to your senses after all these years. I always knew she was trouble. Glad you're serious this time. You moving back? Or want to crash at mine?" I couldn't help but laugh. There's a reason we're best friends. He just gets me without me needing to say a word. I dialed him up right away. "Ben, I'm homeless. Care to take me in?" I teased. He burst out laughing on the other end. "Do you even need to ask? Of course." But then his voice suddenly got serious. "Watch out though, Mark. Sarah's acting all frantic. She's been showing up at friends' places. She might come looking for you." He kept rambling on, but I tuned him out when I saw Sarah herself across the street, just as I stepped out of the cemetery gates. I couldn't help but gripe to Ben. "Dude, seriously, you jinxed it. She's really here." I hung up the call, and in those few seconds, Sarah crossed the street to where I was standing. The urgency I thought I saw from a distance melted away as she got closer. Standing right in front of me, her face went cold with anger. "Are you done with this nonsense?" she demanded, reaching out to grab my hand. I sidestepped her touch, puzzled. "What nonsense, Sarah?" She looked like she was gritting her teeth as she shoved a stack of papers at my chest. I took them and realized it was the divorce agreement. I was at a loss for words. Who runs around with divorce papers in their hand like that? "Didn't I say to just send it to the law firm?" "The lawyer will handle the rest," I said, looking at her seriously and wondering why she specifically felt the need to see me. "Mark!" Okay, now she was genuinely mad. But why was she mad? Was she angry that I didn't handle the divorce stuff faster? I really couldn't figure her out, and maybe I never had. I cleared my throat and looked at her stormy face. All right, don't be mad," I said, trying to ease the tension. As her attitude softened just a fraction, My next words just frustrated her even more. "Since you're already here, should we just swing by the county office and get the divorce finalized? It would save ourselves an extra couple of trips." Sarah clearly couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed my hand and started dragging me toward her car. "In such a hurry?" I muttered. "Shut up," she snapped. The car was deathly quiet. I glanced over at Sarah a couple of times. I had never seen her this profoundly mad before. "What are you looking at?" Sarah asked coldly, her eyes fixed on the road. She didn't even turn her head. I blinked, noticing this didn't seem to be the way to the county office. Suddenly, Sarah slammed on the brakes and pulled the car over to the side of the road. I was startled and just about to complain when she spoke. "How long are you going to keep this up?" she demanded. She seemed to have reached her absolute limit, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her fingertips were white. She turned to look at me with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "Since yesterday, you've been acting strange, staying out all night and talking about a divorce. Tell me, Mark, what is going on?" The suspicion and questioning in her eyes made it perfectly clear. She thought I had cheated. "You really don't know what I mean?" I smirked coldly. "A divorce will be good for both of us. You'll have your fling, and I'll have my life." Sarah's face darkened instantly. "I don't know what you mean. Leo is just my assistant. I was just looking out for him because he got in an accident on my account." "I know," I said flatly. Sarah seemed flustered, and maybe even a little angry, insisting, "There is nothing between us. Can you just stop the jealousy?" Hearing this, I sighed, feeling a bit tired of explaining myself. "I'm not jealous," I said. "Even if you two slept together, I'd be okay." Sarah was completely stunned by that. She clearly never imagined I would say something like that. She opened her mouth but was at a loss for words. It seemed like she even considered that I might need my head checked. "Mark, what's wrong with you? What are you even saying? How could I ever cheat?" Maybe she realized how unconvincing that sounded, because she quickly cleared her throat. "Anyway, I won't agree to a divorce." Now it was my turn to be annoyed. "Why not?" "No reason," she said. "But why do you want a divorce?" Sarah seemed to feel wronged, as if she couldn't imagine what could have happened overnight that made me suddenly want to end our marriage. My eyelashes fluttered as I looked out the window. It took me a while to say something unexpected. "Do you remember a few weeks ago when I called you multiple times at night?" "When don't you call me multiple times a night?" Sarah quipped. "How am I supposed to know which specific night you're talking about?" See? She never cared much at all. I scoffed and put my hand on the door handle. "If you don't remember, then I'm not going to bother explaining it. Just assume I don't love you anymore." Yes, she doesn't love me, so I won't love her either. But she seemed to completely misunderstand my meaning, yanking me back onto the seat with her eyes flaring with anger. "You don't love me? Then who do you love?" I was dumbfounded. Are these roles reversed? That should really be my question for her, right? I was silent for a moment before bursting into laughter, leaving Sarah completely puzzled. How could she possibly accuse me? Someone who ditched her husband on the night his father died to watch fireworks with her fling. How did she have the audacity to suspect me of cheating? I laughed until I teared up, taking a long time to regain my composure. Sorry, I said, wiping the tears away. I just thought of something funny." I quietly stared at her face. How long had it been since I really looked at her? She was always busy working, busy socializing, busy cozying up with her little fling. I felt a bit lost, as if the girl who used to take such good care of me had drifted away over the years. "Do you remember high school, senior year?" I asked, and a sudden bitterness rose within me. If I was in pain, she would surely understand this reference. She clearly knew what I was talking about, but her face immediately turned grim. She hates it when I bring up the past. I'm aware of that. Those times were so dark for her, and she used to say I was her only light. It seems I've become just another part of her unwanted past now. "Why bring that up?" she said curtly. "You know I don't like it when you talk about it." "I don't have a dad anymore," I cut her off. Seeing her face go completely blank brought me a brief, cold sense of satisfaction. You never told me, Mark." "I'm sorry," she stammered, looking genuinely guilty and regretful. But how could I possibly forgive her? I let out a cold laugh. "Of course you wouldn't know." I pulled up that one private message Leo had posted on his social media and waved the phone at her. "You were busy watching fireworks with your fling, weren't you?" Her face instantly changed, turning pale white. She almost immediately grabbed my hand. Mark, I'm sorry, I'm not. Just hear me out, okay?" Pain and remorse washed over her features, but I didn't plan to listen to any of it anymore. My goal was achieved. I had exposed my wounds, wanting only to tear open her hardened pain in return. My voice was calm, sounding like a death knell to our marriage. "Remember when your dad died? I was right there with you. So when my dad was dying, you were the first person I thought of." I looked at her, my gaze no longer holding the love and tenderness I once had. "But where were you?" Her grip on my arm slackened, overwhelmed by the grief that kept her from holding on. "Since we're not heading to the courthouse today," I said, "I'm going to head out. Someone's here to pick me up." I stood up, nudged her aside, and opened the car door. Ben waved to me from his car outside. As I got in, I realized I had already texted him our location, and he had shown up right on time. I turned back, put on a neutral face, and cheerfully told Sarah, "Whenever you're ready to split, just give me a holler. I'm around. But if it's urgent, you'd better book me in advance." She looked a bit stunned, as it had been ages since I had called her by her full name. That name just doesn't roll off my tongue often anymore. I was about to walk away when she rushed out of the car and grabbed my arm, but before she could speak, her phone rang. As she instinctively looked down at her phone, I slipped out of her grip. I saw the caller ID, too. Leo. I smirked. "Looks like you've got a call. Let's catch up at the courthouse next time." In just a few steps, I was by Ben's car, but I glanced back to see she hadn't picked up the call. She just looked at me, her face anxious. She rushed over again, trying to catch my arm. "Mark, I didn't mean—" I just shook her off, chuckled, and left with Ben. The next day, I woke up in Ben's guest room. It was already almost noon. I checked my phone and saw a bunch of missed calls, all from strange numbers. They were probably all from Sarah. I rubbed my hair, picked one of the numbers at random, and called back. It was answered in a second, but it wasn't Sarah on the other end. I had been through this enough times to know who it was. "Mark?" It was Leo. I knew his voice all too well. "Let's meet," he said. "I'm at the cafe below your old office." I didn't ask him why. I had a pretty good hunch, so I didn't bother saying no. "All right," I said. "See you soon." In the cafe, two guys were sitting in the corner booth, creating some awkward vibes. Leo couldn't seem to sit still and just started talking. "Don't think Sarah calling you means she can't let go of you," he said, his voice full of mockery and disdain. "Do you know why she doesn't agree to the divorce? It's because I haven't popped the question yet." I was recording the whole conversation on my phone, thinking it could be useful in court. He must have thought I was scared, since I was being silent and all. "You've only got yourself to blame for being so unlikable," he continued. "Sarah gets a headache just thinking about you." "Well, you should probably hurry her to the courthouse then," I calmly suggested. I don't want her bugging me daily." "You!" Leo thought I was mocking him, and his handsome face twisted with anger and jealousy. But then he seemed to remember something and calmed down, looking all smug. "Don't worry," he said. "It won't be long." I didn't get what he meant by that. But just then my coffee arrived. I was about to take a sip when Leo suddenly grabbed my wrist. The next thing I knew, he had yanked my hand forward and spilled the hot coffee all over himself. I jumped back in surprise. He was barely wearing any layers today, and the hot coffee left a nasty red patch on his chest. He looked up at me, victorious. Just then, Sarah barged into the cafe, and I realized their plan right away. To anyone else in the cafe, it looked as if I had deliberately thrown the scalding coffee at him. Leo gave me a slight grin, mouthing the words, "You're screwed." His acting was top-notch, changing expressions in no time at all. He clutched his burned chest, tears welling up in his eyes, ready to fall at any second. "Mark, what the hell?" he cried out. "All I wanted was for you not to make things hard for Sarah, and you throw coffee at me?" "Mark!" Sarah's worried voice chimed in. Her showing up at this exact moment didn't surprise me. I just put down the empty coffee cup and began wiping the splashes of coffee off my own hands. I figured I might as well let them keep thinking what they wanted. I already didn't have a great reputation with Sarah, so there was no point in denying it. I stayed silent as Leo continued his act. Clutching his chest, he looked up at Sarah. "I'm fine, Sarah. Mark's just having a bad day." Sarah's face was stormy, but her anger wasn't aimed at me. "Get out," she said. "Don't come back tomorrow." She barked the words at Leo, shocking him into silence. "Sarah, I didn't mean—" "Out," she repeated. "Do I need to say it again?" Ignoring Leo completely, she turned to me, her expression softening with genuine worry. "Did you get burned?" she asked. I was just as shocked as Leo was, just standing there dumbfounded. Had she gone nuts? Shouldn't she be saying that to Leo? "Sarah, it's Leo with the coffee stain," I pointed out, gesturing to him. "Mark, I'm not with him," she said desperately. "You're my husband. Why would I care about some other guy?" She was so desperate to prove herself that she didn't even care that Leo was still standing right there. I ignored her and calmly packed up my stuff. "Maybe you should check on him instead," I said, nodding toward Leo. "He looks like he's about to fall apart." With that, the misunderstanding was cleared up, but I had no interest in playing along with their drama. "Mark!" Sarah panicked, but her sudden softness didn't sway me. She trailed behind me as I walked out, looking oddly pitiful despite being 5'7". I didn't care what had suddenly gotten into her. "I've signed the divorce papers," I said. "Tomorrow, we settle it." She almost pleaded, "Mark, please don't. What would it take for you to forgive me?" "If you divorce me, maybe I'll think about it," I said flatly. I stood by the curb, waiting for Ben to pick me up. Sarah didn't expect my response. Her face crumpled, and it looked like she could cry. "Okay," she answered, her voice trembling. The divorce went through quickly after that. Even if Sarah was reluctant, her pride wouldn't let her back out of it now. Her face was sour the whole time, but we got through the process. The moment I had the finalized divorce papers in my hand, I felt a surprising and profound sense of relief. "Wish you happiness," I told Sarah, then turned to leave. She suddenly grabbed me, stopping me, and asked, "Mark, have you forgiven me?" Her expression reminded me so much of her at 18, the same vulnerable look she had when she said I was the only one for her. I gently freed myself from her hand, looked down, and replied, "I forgive you." Before she could feel happy about that, I added, "But you know there's no chance for us anymore." Saying that, I walked away. Sarah just stood there on the courthouse steps, not moving for a very long time. The day after our divorce was finalized, I flew abroad and started my new life. My mentor at the Research Institute provided me with great support and help, and I quickly immersed myself in my work. Having had a void in that part of my life for so many years, I kept myself incredibly busy, not having time for anything else. But Sarah, it turned out, regretted it. She regretted it the very day of the divorce. She kept trying to talk to me, unwilling to give up, but she couldn't find me because I hadn't told her I was going abroad. Yet, she didn't give up on finding out about me. She found Ben, wanting to know how I was doing. Her constant inquiries annoyed Ben until he finally told her the truth. "Can you just let Mark go?" Ben said coldly. "You think he didn't know? Every time you and Leo were together, Leo would post something on his social media that was visible only to Mark." Sarah was stunned, as if she had been struck by lightning. You know how many times Mark was provoked by Leo, right? If you ever cared about him, you would have known his questions weren't without reason. Later, Ben told me that Sarah kept apologizing to him, apologizing for neglecting me. He said Sarah finally understood how big of a mistake she had made. She began to regret it immensely, realizing the depth of her neglect and the hurt she had caused me. She kept trying to contact me, but I had changed my number and cut off all ties with her. She could only get news of me through Ben, learning that I was doing well abroad, which apparently made her feel both happy and pained. Ben said Sarah became like a walking dead. Her life became unbearably hollow. She constantly reminisced about our time together, feeling increasingly foolish for her past decisions, and she started frequently visiting all the places I used to like, hoping to find any trace of me. She even left Leo. Due to her being so heartless toward him in the end, Leo began spreading stories about her, like how she left her husband right after his dad passed away to be with some guy, giving him fancy watches, and so on. It ruined her reputation and caused her company's stock to plummet. But Sarah didn't seem to care about any of it anymore, only drinking herself into oblivion and yelling my name. "She brought this on herself, Mark. Don't let your heart soften," Ben said worriedly before hanging up. I just chuckled, telling him not to worry. To me, Sarah was already firmly in the past. Without her, my life was still good. Later, I returned to my home country for an academic conference. Somehow, Sarah found out about it and came early to wait outside the venue for me. The moment I got out of the car, she rushed over. "Mark!" Her eyes were red and her voice was trembling. I'm sorry, it was all my fault." I was taken aback, not expecting to see her here after all this time. "Sarah, we're divorced," I said calmly. "You don't have to apologize for the past." Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with pain and regret. "Mark, I really know I was wrong," she choked up. "Please, give me a chance to make up for my mistake." I looked at her, feeling incredibly calm inside. I had imagined many times how I might feel seeing Sarah again. The past love and hate were intertwined, but they could no longer stir any waves in my heart. I smiled at her faintly, a smile that was calm yet completely detached. "Sarah, our past can't be changed. You should move forward and find your own happiness." A hint of despair flashed in her eyes, but she nodded slowly. "I understand," she said softly. "But I'll always wait for you, until you're willing to forgive me." I said nothing more, and simply turned to go into the conference venue. I knew Sarah stood there watching my back, but no matter how much regret and pain filled her heart at that moment, it had nothing to do with me. I would look forward and continue to shine brightly in the field I excelled in, and none of it involved Sarah. I would live well and love myself properly.